Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Welcome to the program. So glad that you joined me. You could join me in the chat room by going to israelnewstalkradio.com and clicking on that button that says chat room. It's right there on the top of the page. And you could join me in the chat room. And of course, you are always welcome to call into the show. This is a call-in show, and that's why we like for you to call in. So you're always welcome to call into the show. The numbers are on the top of the page on Israel News Talk Radio. But if you really insist, I'll give them to you anyway. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 026500-151. So it's been 2 years since the attack on the synagogue in Pittsburgh, on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 2 years. And in those 2 years since that attack, has anything changed in regards to Jew hatred in North America? Are Jews still one of the most hated people in North America? I will argue they are, and I will argue that nothing has changed. In fact, things have gotten worse since the synagogue attack 2 years ago. Things have gotten worse, and especially now, when we're coming up to an American election in about a week, we're starting to see real rabid Jew hatred coming out. And not only are we seeing rabid Jew hatred coming out from non-Jews, but we're also seeing Jew hatred being perpetrated on the Jewish people by Jews. It's a sad statement. It's a sad statement, but it's true. There are people out there who don't like their own people. I don't understand how that happens. I love my people. I'm part of a tribe. I love the tribe that I'm part of. But there are people out there who work against the tribe. In fact, there was a movie released this week that I want to talk to you about that really kind of drives home the point. We'll talk about it when we come back from the break. Join me in the chat room on Israel News Talk Radio. And, of course, you could call in, and I'd love to hear your opinion on anything I'm talking about right here on the Political Hitman Show on Israel News Talk Radio. I'd love to hear your opinion. And, of course, it's a call-in show. So feel free to call in. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, here on Israel News Talk Radio. Just a couple of seconds before we came back on the air, my mic stand decided to give up on me, and so the entire mic stand fell apart. And so I am sitting here and I'm holding the microphone. So if the sound sounds a little different than you're normally used to it sounding, that is the reason. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio, live radio. You never know what's going to happen. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Of course, you could always call in. This is a call-in show in North America. The number 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 026500-151. The last time I held a microphone while doing a show was when I was doing my TV show, and they had a boom mic. And the boom mic, the guy who was using the boom mic, you have a guy who does audio, and he holds the boom mic, and it kind of hangs over you, and you talk. And the guy who was doing the boom mic, he got sick in the middle of the show, and they didn't have anybody to replace him. So there was a guy behind the camera, there was me, and there was a guy who was holding the boom mic. So I ended up taking the boom mic, and I had to hold it too. And that was the last time. It was about 25 years ago. It was the last time I had ever held a microphone in my hand while actually doing a show. So this is a little bit of a flashback for me. It's a little nostalgic. I'm very happy to do this though. So because I love doing this show and I love talking to you. So anyway, you could call in. Once again, the numbers are on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could join me in the chat room. It'll be kind of hard for me to type to you at the moment, but when we go to break, I'll be able to respond to your messages in the chat room on Israel News Talk Radio. So it's been 2 years since the calm of Shabbos morning, the calm of the Sabbath, was broken when a gunman entered the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and opened fire. 11 individuals that day were killed while praying, murdered simply for being Jewish. Since the Pittsburgh attack, the Jewish community has faced 3 additional deadly attacks in the United States, and law enforcement has disrupted more than 24 plots aimed at Jewish organizations around the country, mostly from white extremists. At the same time, the Jewish community has faced a historic increase in anti-Jewism. Last year, over 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at the Jewish community in North America. Now, while many Jewish communities and organizations have long made investments, they've invested hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars into creating fortresses, that they call synagogues. They're not synagogues, they're castles with security and moats and you name it, they've put it in. This is what's happening in North America for Jews. They've invested millions and millions and millions of dollars since the Pittsburgh attack. The reality that we face as a faith-based community requires much more. And of course it does. And what does it require? It requires Jews to realize that the end of the line for Judaism has come in North America. When 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes are directed at the Jewish community, there is a serious problem for Jews in North America. Now, I know people living in their posh $1 million homes and going to their 5, 6, 7-digit jobs don't really feel the pinch. But imagine, over half of all religiously motivated hate crimes in the United States of America, that's the entire United States, 350 million people living in the United States of America, over 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes were against Jews. Now, what do you think the percentage of Jews in the United States is? What do you think the percentage of Jews in the 350 million people living in the United States is? I would venture to say it's under 1%. And yet 58% of all hate crimes are directed at the Jewish community. So we've talked about this before. We've discussed the idea that the Jewish community is targeted because people are jealous of the Jewish community. We've talked about the fact that the Jewish community has the truth. We have the Torah. We have the truth, and so a lot of religious hatred is based on the fact that people are jealous of the Jews that have the truth. We've spoken about this before in the show. This is not a big secret. This is not a new revelation I'm bringing up on the show. And now, on top of all that, we also have Jews producing movies that are critical and that make Jews look bad. So just this week, a movie was released. Sacha Baron Cohen released his latest Borat movie. Now, I realize that Borat movies are not documentaries; they are fictional movies produced to create havoc. First of all, in the U.S. election, and second of all, they're to entertain. That's what movies are created for, to entertain. But this Borat movie bothered me. I watched it because I can't talk about something I didn't watch. Normally, I would not watch movies like this because I feel that that I lose brain cells when I watch movies like Borat. But I watched the Borat 2 movie. People started talking. I have a Facebook group that's very active, and people in my Facebook group started talking about this Borat movie. And so I couldn't respond to them, and I couldn't. They were asking me questions, and they were telling me about it, and I couldn't respond to them unless I actually went to see the movie, unless I actually watched it. So I loaded it up, and I watched the Borat movie. And aside from the disgusting and revolting humor that Sacha Baron Cohen seems to trade in, There were a couple of scenes that were extremely disturbing to me. So in the first Borat movie, there was a scene where Borat got, not the one that was just released, but the one that was released 14 years ago. There was a scene where Borat got up on a stage in a country music bar, and he started singing a song that he wrote, that Sacha Baron Cohen wrote, called "Throw the Jew in the Well." And it was talking about how evil the Jew is and how the Jews have horns and the Jews should be thrown into the well. And in this movie here, he was trying to make the point that Donald Trump is a racist. So this was the point that Borat was trying to make. So they went into a cake shop and they asked the person in the cake shop to write on their cake, "The Jews will not replace us." Of course, that is an homage to the White Power rally in Charlottesville at the beginning of the Trump presidency. The hoax that Trump praised white supremacists came from that. So, but the fact that Sacha Baron Cohen is a Jew, and the fact that he comes up with these ideas like "throw the Jews in the well," and the Jews will not replace us, to distribute in mass distribution movies is disturbing to me. Now, why is this disturbing? People say to me, "Howie, everyone knows it's fiction. Howie, what are you, crazy? Well, who takes Borat seriously? So who cares?" I'll tell you why we should care. I tell you why we should care. We should care about Sacha Baron Cohen and his Borat movie and the anti-Jewism in his Borat movie, because over 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at the Jewish community in North America last year. That's why we should care. We should care because when these movies come out and they're massively distributed, I mean, this one is distributed on Amazon, the other one was distributed in the theaters. They're mass distributed, and when these movies are mass distributed, I could see it and laugh and say, "All right, so he's a Jew making fun of Jews, ha ha ha." And you could look at it and say, it's Borat, who's taking him seriously? But there are nutcases out there who will look at this and say, he has a point. Maybe we should throw the Jew down the well. It's a real slippery slope when we start allowing mass media, when we start allowing mass movies and mass media and massively distributed entertainment, and I'll use that in a very loose term, to start promoting anti-Jewish sentiments. It's enough that we have the governor of New York creating blood libels against the Jewish community. It's enough we have the mayor of New York apologizing for supporting the blood libels of the governor of New York. Now we have movies that are promoting anti-Jewish sentiments and that are trying to push this notion that the Jews could be scapegoated, the Jews could be stepped on, the Jews could be attacked, and the Jewish community does nothing to counter this. And that is the sick part about this whole thing, that the North American Jewish community has done nothing and does nothing and continues to do nothing to counter these attacks upon them. And because they do nothing and they show that they're weak, the weak is always picked on. And since the weak is always picked on, over 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes are perpetrated against the Jewish community in America. So when we take a look at the statistic, and that's a real statistic, it's there. We take a look at the statistic and we take a look at what's happening around this statistic. We know, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist, it doesn't take a brilliant political scientist to figure it out, that the end has come for the North American Jewish community. It doesn't take a rocket science to see this. And so one has to ask, why has the North American Jewish community not made Aliyah to Israel? Why have they not moved to Israel? Israel is the country that protects them. Why haven't they gone there? And the answer is not as simple as it sounds, but it's something that we have to look at. And we're going to look at that when we come back from the break, because why haven't they moved? And we have to look at some of the other countries and Jews in the other countries to understand why the Jews in North America haven't moved. So we're going to do that when we come back from the break, because I think it's important that we talk about this. I don't hear too many people talking about it, so I think it's important that we have this discussion. You could call in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. You could join me in the chat room at israelnewstalkradio.com. And the conversation in the chat room is always interesting. So please go to israelnewstalkradio.com and join me in the chat room. I am holding my microphone now, so I can't answer your comments in the chat room, but I will be able to answer your comments, hopefully next segment when I find another mic stand. I'm Howie Silverger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silverger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. You could join me in the chat room on israelnewstalkradio.com. Just click on that button on the top of the page that says chat room, and I'll be more than happy to join you in the chat room as soon as my hands are free. The last segment, I for those of you just tuning in, the last segment, my mic stand decided to blow up on me, so I have to hold the microphone instead of having it hanging in front of me, so my hands are free to do other stuff. I'm holding the microphone, so it'll be hard for me to type into the chat room, but I could read your messages. So if you don't want to call in and you just want to send me a message, you could do so by going to israelnewstalkradio.com and joining the chat room. So we were talking just before the break about this stupid Borat movie that just came out, and how in this current Borat movie, Borat 2 or whatever they call it, he walks into a cake shop and he asked the cake shop owner to write, the Jews won't replace us on a cake. And of course she does, but it's all set up. It's all fake. It's not a documentary. It's a movie. And so she writes it. She writes it on the cake. In the previous Borat movie, Borat managed to get a room full of rednecks to sing "Throw the Jew Down the Well." Now, the fact that anti-Jewism exists in the United States should not be a surprise to anybody. We all know that happens. We all know that that's true. And you really shouldn't be shocked. Oh my gosh, how did Borat get people to do this? This is not something that I think should surprise anybody. But at the same time, we should be disturbed, because promoting this kind of hatred in movies, even if it's farcical movies, even if it's movies that they are trying to make fun of politicians or whatever else by using these kind of examples, by promoting this hatred, we are just fanning the flames of anti-Jewism in North America. So now we know that 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at the Jewish community last year. We know this because the ADL released a report. We know this because Pew released a report. So we know conclusively that 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at the Jewish community. So once we know this, more than half of the religiously, I'm repeating it 3 times because it's almost an unbelievable statistic, but more than half of all religiously motivated hate crimes were directed at the Jewish community in North America. Why are the Jews of North America staying in North America? This is the question that I'm asking you. And so we have to look at some of the other countries to realize that the Jews in North America are no different than Jews anywhere else. So what do I mean by that? When the French Jews started receiving, I mean, they never really stopped since World War II receiving the idea of anti-Jewism. They've always faced anti-Jewism in France from even before World War II. But since World War II, anti-Jewism ramped up in France. And we got to a point in France where the chief rabbi of France had to tell the people, and this was maybe 15 years ago, chief rabbi of France got up and told the Jewish community, do not wear your yarmulkes, do not wear your kippahs in public. Don't wear anything that would identify you as a Jew in public, because the chances of you getting attacked because of what you are wearing, because of your Jewish attire, is high in France. And in order to save your lives, you should not wear anything Jewish. And the people of France stopped wearing their yarmulkes, they stopped wearing their kippahs, and they stopped wearing their stars of David. They stopped wearing their fringes, their tzitzis. They tucked them into their pants. They put on baseball caps when they went into the subways and onto public transportation when they walked on streets. And they hid their Judaism. So, picture this, and you don't have to picture it. You don't have to think too hard. All you have to do is remember or look back at news stories that a Jewish population in a European town that was attacked by the Nazis, a European town that was run by the fascists, and the fascists lost the war, and freedom was gained by everybody except for the Jewish community. The Jewish community had to hide. The Jewish community had to hide their identity. The Jewish community had to get under a rock and hide. And the Jews of France stayed. They didn't leave. And they stayed after a terrorist attacked a Jewish school, a girls' school, and killed a young girl, a little girl, in front of the school, and shot up the school. They stayed. And then after a supermarket was bombed, they stayed. Sure, there were pockets of Jews in France that left, that said, oh, we don't have to live in this. We're not that far away from Israel. Israel's our country. Israel's our homeland. Israel is the place where Jews could go to be safe. We could go there. And they chose to stay. Majority of French Jews chose to stay in France and are still living in France and are still, 25 years later, hiding their identity. They're still hiding their identity. They're still hiding their yarmulkes. They're still afraid to walk through the streets of France, of Paris, with a kippah on their head, or with a black hat, or identifiably Jewish. And this is where we're at. So, the Jews of France stayed, even though the rise of anti-Jewism is great in France, the people of France stayed. Okay, now, let's move on. Let's take a look at England, because England is an interesting case. There has never been a great amount of anti-Jewish hatred in England. It's not an English thing. The English people are much more refined than that, so it hasn't really been an English thing to hate Jews. But Jew hatred in England has grown because, as in the rest of Europe, England has been infiltrated by radical Islamics who have come to cause trouble in other countries, and there's no question about it. I mean, you call me Islamophobic if you want to, and that's fine, because that is the general term they always use whenever you talk about the onslaught of radical Islamic people who go into a country and start causing trouble. And that's fine. I have no issue with you calling me that, because it's not true. So I'd have an issue if it was true, but if it's not true, I have no issue with you calling me that. So if you want to call me that, you could do that. That's fine. Because I only speak in the truth here. I don't care. So when we take a look at that, and we take a look at the rise of radical Islam in England, we see that there's been a rise in Jew hatred in England. Yet the English Jews are staying in England. Now, it hasn't gotten as bad as France, so the chief rabbi of England hasn't told the Jews to hide their Judaism as they did in France. But it's getting there. It's getting close. Then we take a look at Spain, and Spain is the same situation. So when the going gets tough for Jews, now we're a resilient people, and we tend to go with the punches. When the Jews get attacked, and the Jews get oppressed, and 58% of hate crimes are directed against the Jewish community, and the Jews have an option. They don't have to live like that. There is an option, and they choose not to take that option. One has to wonder what's going on. One has to wonder why Jews in France are still living in France. Why haven't the mass majority, why haven't every Jew in France left France? You can't walk and live peacefully as a Jew. French synagogues, French schools have armed guards with rifles and snipers on the roofs. Their children, if you want to send your kid to a school in France, in Paris, France, a Jewish school, you have to send your kid in an armored school bus. An armored school bus. Yet, the Jews there stayed. So why have the Jews stayed in these countries? Why is it that the Jews have not fled? Why have they not left the countries? Have we not learned from past experiences that when people say, we hate you, and people express the fact that they hate you, that they're telling you the truth? Why do we always make excuses for our enemies? Why do we always say, hey, listen, the enemy said that they hate us and they want to kill us, but that's not really what they meant. Why do I always hear that? It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. And this is called, and I have a theory for this, and this is called the victimization theory. This is called that Jews have been victims for so long that it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. It's almost like that the Jewish community they have this affinity towards the people that hate them. It is actually a very scary and horrible disease to have. And there are a lot of Jews who hate the state of Israel. Now, why do they hate the state of Israel? Well, there's many reasons. And I don't accept the argument that they're self-hating Jews and they're Jew haters, and that's why they hate the state of Israel. That's not the truth. That is not the truth at all. And you know what? We're going to talk about why there are Jews that hate the state of Israel when we come back from the break. Because I think that is probably one of the keys on why North American Jewry, after 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes are directed at the Jewish community, are still there. I think that the Jews that hate the state of Israel are part of the major problem that has to be dealt with. And let's talk about that when we come back from the break. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Just go to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, click on that button that says chat room. Join me in the chat room. You could always call in if you want to join in on the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. The numbers are on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Soberger. This is Political Hitman.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany is but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political hitman. I'm Howie Silverger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And, of course, you could call into the show. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. If you join me in the chat room, I unfortunately won't be able to type to you because I'm holding the microphone. You see, the mic stand broke. And so the microphone that's usually held by a mic stand is no longer available to hold the mic stand, to hold the microphone. So I'm holding it in my hand, and so I can't hold the mic in my hand and type at the same time. So those of you in the chat room, I'm reading your messages, and I'm enjoying the conversation, but I won't take part in the conversation today on in the chat room because I can't type. Well, I can't type while I'm holding the microphone. So we were talking about anti-Jewism here in North America. We were talking about anti-Jewism. We're talking about the fact that many attacks on Jews in North America, 58% of all religiously based attacks on Jews in North America were committed against Jews. And I'm wondering, why are Jews in North America staying? So right before the break, I mentioned that there is a group of Jews, a large segment of Jews in North America, who hate Israel, and they won't move to Israel because they hate the country. Now, why do they hate the country? What causes them to hate the country of Israel? So there's numerous things. Number one, there's the Palestinian lie. That is the first thing that causes them to hate the state of Israel. Many of these people who are Israel haters, and I'm not going to conflate Israel hating with Jew hating. I know a lot of people like to do that, saying that Jew hatred is Israel hatred is anti-Jewism, and there are many people who make that argument. I will not make that argument because I think that there are people who hate the state of Israel, who deplore the state of Israel, but at the same time don't hate Jews. And I think you can make a separation between people who hate Israel and people who hate Jews. I think we could draw a line between the two of them. Sometimes they overlap, and that is true. Sometimes anti-Israel rhetoric is anti-Jewish rhetoric, and it's just being masked by being anti-Israel. That is 100% true, but not always. Now, there are a lot of Jews in North America who hate Israel because they feel that Israel is oppressing because they bought into the Palestinian lie that Israel's an oppressor. There are plenty of Jews in North America that hate Israel because Israel calls itself a Jewish state, and they hate everything Jewish. There are a lot of Jews in North America who hate Israel because they feel that their country, the country that they live in, represents them more than the state of Israel would ever represent them. So there's a lot of differing opinions about the state of Israel in North America. And those differing opinions actually keep Jews from moving to North America. They from North America to Israel. These kind of differing opinions are part of the problem. And why do Jews feel the way they feel? This is the question that has been asked to me a million times. Every time I talk about this topic, somebody asks me the question, why do Jews feel this way? The answer isn't as easy as it sounds. Jews that go to university have a perspective that is drilled into them at university. And now I can speak to this from personal experience. I I have 3 university degrees. I got 2 university degrees in the mid '90s, and I got another university degree just last year. I finished the degree last year. So I spent a couple of years at university in the 2000s. I spent a couple of years in the '90s, and I spent a couple of years in the 2000s. In the 2000s and 2018, 2019, 2017, I was at university here. I was at university, and I got another degree. And when I was in university in the '90s, and I'll tell you, I went to a anti-Israel, anti-Jewish university, a university that was affectionately referred to by the Jewish community as Gaza U, a university that had a full-fledged riot where the entire lobby of the university was destroyed because Bibi Netanyahu came to speak on campus. So this university is known worldwide as an anti-Israel university. And there's no question that the anti-Israel sentiment, although now it's hidden in the university, it's buried, it's still there. There are universities in North America that Jewish students, the Hillels on the university campuses, don't have activities outside of their offices. They can't have activities outside of their offices. If they do, they're either shouted down by anti-Israel, even if it's not an Israeli, Israeli coming to speak. They get shouted down by anti-Israel protesters, and they get shut down by anti-Jewish protesters. And this happens a lot on university campuses. And of course, the majority of people on university campuses aren't people like me in their 40s. There are people who are in their 20s and they don't know how to respond to this. And this is part of the issue. So these kids who are in university campuses, who are learning now for the first time real life politics, some of them come from very sheltered backgrounds, some of them come from very sheltered educational institutions. And now they're entering a university where all these ideas are being expressed, especially these anti-Israel ideas. They're impressionable, and trust me, the propagandists for the anti-Israel side are much better than the propagandists for the pro-Israel side, and they buy into the notion, the anti-Israel notion. I've seen it firsthand. I've had arguments, I've had discussions, I've had them on my show. Firsthand, people who bought into the anti-Israel argument. And when they buy into this anti-Israel argument, they become fervent anti-Israel advocates. And when young people are running around and they're screaming, older people sometimes don't take them all that seriously. But we should always take them seriously because they're influential. And they influence their friends and they influence everybody else. And so when we say that, that anti-Jewish attacks in North America are at an all-time high, over 58% of all religiously motivated attacks were against the Jewish community. When that statistic actually comes out, and it's a true statistic, and it's actually a true statistic, these people don't believe it. Well, I've never been attacked, they tell me. What are you talking about? I've been going to university. I've been walking around. Nobody's ever told me anything because I'm Jewish. And they'll repeat it to you over and over and over again. And then you wonder, okay, so does a person have to actually be physically attacked in order to believe a statistic that the majority of attacks are against Jews? If that is the case, then we have a serious problem. I think that looking at a statistic like that and saying, holy cow, 58% of all religiously motivated hate crimes are directed at the Jewish community should be incentive enough for people living in those communities to say, whoa, I'm out of here. That should be incentive enough. We have to learn from our past. And in our past, we saw that when there were religiously motivated hate crimes, and the Jewish community ignored those religiously motivated hate crimes, and they said, it'll only get better. We have to leave it alone. It'll only get better. If we speak too much, if we complain too much, we'll make it worse. We shouldn't make it worse. We have to ensure that it gets better. So let's just keep quiet. If we ignore it, it'll go away. It never goes away. In fact, it spreads into our community and becomes a cancer in our community. And that's why movies like Borat could come out, where a Jewish guy could lead a sing-along in a bar as a mockumentary, as a joke, as a whatever you want to call it, but a Jewish guy could get up in a bar and he could sing a song about throwing Jews in a well. Where a Jewish guy could walk into a cake shop and he could say, I'd like the Jews will not replace us, printed on a cake, and then distribute this movie to millions of people. That is more influential than anything Donald Trump will ever say. That is more influential than anything any Jew hater will ever say. When the Jews start attacking their own community, that's where the problem is. Because Jews are too comfortable in North America. And they feel that because they are so comfortable, they are so assimilated, they feel like they're so accepted, they could smash their community, they could go after their community, they could mock their community, and they could sing songs about throwing their Jews into a well. Where were the Jewish riots in New York City when the blood libel was labeled on them by their governor, Mario Cuomo? The Jews sat in their homes because they're comfortable in their homes. Affluence brings apathy. And that is the problem with the Jewish community. And that is why the Jews will never leave North America until the Jew haters get up and start killing them. And then it'll probably be too late. I know it's a sad commentary. It's scary, it's sad, and it's something I don't like repeating. But it's the truth. And we have to face the truth. If we don't face the truth, and we don't realize that the end is here, then we're just going to end up like sheep to the slaughter. And nobody ever wants to see that again. I'm Howie Silverger. I want to thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week right here on Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.